605. Today's interview is my personal walk down memory lane with Danielle Hahn, founder of Rose Story Farm and a recipient of the Great Rosarians of the World Award. I'm delighted that Dani has joined me to talk about her long-awaited debut book, The Color of Roses, just out late last month. If you're a rose lover, you already know about Rose Story Farm in Carpinteria, California, a mecca for garden roses, all 40,000 plants that produce cut flowers to supply the national floral trade and event design world. Rose Story Farm thrives under the care of Dani, her husband Bill Hahn, her mother Patricia Dall'Armi, her sister Nina Dall'Armi, her business manager Patty Keck, and so many other longtime farm staff members. She may not remember this, but I first met Dani in October of 2007 when I had recently relocated to Ventura County, and my Seattle friends, Marianne and Charles Pember, who were vacationing in Santa Barbara, invited me to meet them at Rose Story Farm for one of its famous tours and luncheons in the display gardens, complete with a rose cake. It was wonderful. Writing about that visit was one of my very first blog posts. Later, we corresponded when Dani joined the Slow Flower Society during the very first year of our organization. And then I visited during an industry dinner in 2014, where we finally met again in person. Soon thereafter, Dani appeared as a guest, my 26th guest on the podcast of the new Slow Flowers podcast in February 2014. So much has happened in the ensuing years, which she and I discuss in today's episode, while I also turn through the pages of The Color of Roses. And together we admire the lush and dreamy rose photography of Victoria Pearson, all 330 pages of it. Let's jump right in and meet Danielle Hahn, catch up on all that she's been doing, and learn why she wants to reclassify the term garden roses. I'll share our sponsor thank yous after the interview. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Slow Flower Show. And today I'm so thrilled to welcome my dear friend, Dani Hahn of Rose Story Farm. Hi, Dani.
How are you, Debra?
I'm great. It's so great to see you in your beautiful space. And your hair looks great, by the way. You've got a kind of a modern shag now.
It was time. It was time. I've got a big birthday coming up, which I'm not excited about. So I had to do something to
you look awesome. Wow.
Thank you.
You know, your roses are almost as beautiful as you are. And
Debra, thank you.
I just am so happy we're doing this. Just by way of background to folks, I say that I'm welcoming Dani back, but she's never been on our video show. We only have done this for 2 years, but we just looked it up. Dani was my 28th ever guest of the Slow Flowers podcast back in 2014. So it's a high time that we do this again.
Well, it's really delightful to be here. So
wow. So you're coming to us from your writing studio at Rose Story Farm in Carpinteria. And I visited your farm before. You did show a little peek out the door of the rose fields. So I think we should just have you rotate so people can see where you are.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see here. See if you can, Debra, you're going to have to.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Can everybody see? Yeah, rows and rows, but we are about a month and a half behind any year we've ever experienced. We should have, this field should be completely full of roses right now.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the weather has been insane.
Yeah.
But it's not just this year. You've had crazy weather for many years.
It's crazy. Yes, it is. So anyway, I'll go back. But if we want to be in that direction, we can do that. So.
No, you're perfect. And I was going to say, and still she persists. So we're here to celebrate. Yeah, we're here to celebrate the publication of The Color of Roses, this amazing, beautiful kind of a love letter to roses from you and your collaborator, photographer, Victoria Pearson, who I think I met at your farm once.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
This is a chunky book.
We've been working together for 25 years. Vicki did our first little piece of press for us. I think we decided it was in 2004, which is crazy. So
was that for a national publication?
Santa Barbara Magazine was the very first, and then we did Martha Stewart and Oprah and I mean, we've done Better Homes and Gardens, and she's photographed them all,
Wow.
everything.
Wow.
And she's just, well, as you can see with the book, it's pretty amazing. Her stuff, she is just a complete nitpicker, and everything is absolutely spot on, perfect.
Yeah.
So,
But you're kind of like that too, in terms of the precision of detail that I've learned from you about how to describe roses and what the particular characteristics are. It's you're a walking encyclopedia.
okay.
So it's no wonder, Dani, it's no wonder that all this knowledge you have has earned you lots of attention and awards. I think the biggest, most prestigious one for you is the Great Rosarian of the World, being inducted into that small cadre of Rosarians, right?
Yes, yeah, that really, it was shocking and humbling and a great honor. It was, yeah, pretty awesome.
Yeah,
I
I
read
remember
the
that.
list of people that had received it before me, and I thought, "Oh, this is wrong. I'm a fraud. This is not me. I don't belong
No,
here."
no,
Honestly, it's
no.
just crazy. These people are really, they've given their life to roses, and this has just been fun for me for 25 years. It's just been, like a party. So in that
But
sense,
yeah, but you're a practitioner. I mean, you're touching roses every day, and you're you've demonstrated such a vast kind of palette of roses that you can grow and that people want. And you've popularized a lot of the garden roses that were sort of unknown in the floral industry, I would think.
right. Well, I hope so. I mean, my whole purpose when we started sort of thinking about how we were going to get our message out into the world was to just sort of try to demystify the rose and get more people to try it by having the tours, the educational tours, and then we serve them a little lunch or some tea in the garden, and they were able to ask questions. And I think slowly but surely, that's what's happened. The rose has become a little bit less, sort of less complicated, as it were. Um,
Yeah.
so that's exciting for me, and to have all these people that are so now interested in growing roses is really exciting. It's exciting, and it
Hmm.
means that there's going to be more roses available for people to buy and more roses to use, and just for the general population. I think
Hmm.
now just about anybody can grow some roses in their garden and pick them for their dinner table.
Wow.
That's kind of
Yeah.
fun.
Well, just for the visual joy of it all, I'm going to pop up the spreads, the PDF of the book. Your publisher is generous enough to share it with me. We're starting with the inside pages, so you all saw the cover, and I will post the cover and some of these inside pages in our show notes uh, at slowflowerspodcast.com. But Dani, talk a little bit about how, with your collaboration with Victoria for so many years, how did you finally decide what you wanted to include in this book with this curated spectrum of 300 blooms? Let's talk about that, and I'll just flip through some of the pages while we're talking.
Okay, so first of all, I want readily available either to the trade, to the floristry trade, or to home gardeners for their garden. So they had to be roses that were available. Now, some of them are not as easily accessible for gardens as they might be for cut flowers, and vice versa. But that was the main thing, was to make sure that the roses were accessible. And then secondly, we wanted to make sure that they were all pretty easy to grow. And I focused on modern roses. There are only a few roses in the book that are prior to 1867, which is the sort of the beginning of the modern rose.
Okay.
And
Wow.
those I selected those because they are absolutely bulletproof and they're just gorgeous.
Wow.
I think lots of, I mean, like Sombrier, I just love that rose. It's just absolutely perfect for certain conditions in your garden, an arbor, or mostly I like them on arches and arbors.
Mhm.
And then I
Mhm.
also included Cecile Bruner, which, will take over a building if you let her.
I have
So
had that rose in my past.
so
That's
so
cool.
the older ones were selected because I felt like they deserved a home in everybody's garden.
Mm.
But mostly, and so I tried to photograph everything that was in our garden. So about 160 to 80 of the roses are roses that we grow here on the farm. And the others I was able to work with Otto and Sons Nursery, who are my great pals down in Fillmore. And
Yeah, that's a great
we
nursery. I've been
selected,
there.
yes, we selected the last 120 there. Um, we started the book a little late in the season, which meant that it was a bit more challenging. I think if we'd started the photography, say in April or early May, we would have had, it would have been an easier chore. But because we didn't start it till I think the end of June, early July, a lot of the roses were sort of off peak, and it was challenging to find the flower that I wanted to have photographed. So at the end, at the beginning, we would photograph 30 or 40 in a day, and I just go
Gosh.
out and pick the most perfect examples of the flowers. But at the end of the whole process, I would be driving down to Otto at 4:30 in the morning, going out there at the absolute crack of day with Timmy, and we'd ride around in the golf cart and try to find a perfect bloom. And sometimes it was just one bloom, and then I'd pick that bloom and drive it over to Ojai and give it to Vicky. And sometimes, the bloom was just not quite what she wanted, so we'd have to start over the next day. So it was really a labor of
Oh my
love.
gosh.
And certainly the last 30 that we photographed it was a challenge. So
I'm really impressed, Dani, because like I'm looking at this. This is the very first, I guess, rose profile in the book. So you kind of organize it so you're seeing a detail of the bloom with its beautiful petals, and then a portrait of the rose on its stem, so you can see the foliage and the habit. Is that sort of how you wanted to portray all of
no,
these? Oh,
sorry. No, each rose, no, if you go back to that other picture, I can
okay, yeah,
talk about that one. So each page is a separate rose. And what we wanted to
okay,
do was we wanted to show the rose in what we felt was the perfect way to show that particular bloom. So the one on the left, that I can't read that. I think
it
it's
says
Jardin de
Jardin.
Bagatelle.
Yes.
De
Mm-hmm.
Bagatelle.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was going to guess. So that rose, the center of that rose is so spectacular that we wanted to focus on that for this particular bloom. So that's what we showed. And then opposite that, on Bolero, that's kind of more fun to see the whole stem. So each rose, we decided what view of the actual stem we wanted to
Got it.
feature. And
Sure.
then we wanted to we arranged them in kind of a rainbow so as you flip through, and that was a huge job to try to arrange all the pictures and then make sure they were color corrected to match the actual bloom.
Wow.
Huge job, huge
Wow.
job. But
Wow.
see how on the right, we just love that Floribunda kind of look.
Great.
And then the one
Yeah.
on the left, that was just, I mean, that rose is just spectacular.
Mm.
So anyway, and then we also did not retouch the photographs. I wanted people to understand that a rose could be absolutely gorgeous without being perfect. I mean, it could have an insect bite on the leaf or a little bit of browning around the edge of the petal, thrip damage.
I
So
love that. Yeah, and it's really it's your eye and Victoria's eye that found the best light. You found the best bloom. She found the best light. The photo is just these
right,
photos are so evocative, Dani. I'm picturing you at
yeah,
4:30 in
they're.
the
I
morning
mean,
though with like a cooler in your car, so that because these days get really hot where you
exactly.
live. Dani, I wanted to stop at this spread because Julia Child is on the right and Charles Darwin is on the left. What an interesting pairing you've
I
you've
know.
put together. They need to have a dinner party together, right?
don't they?
Yeah.
Up there watching us? Yes.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you have a special relationship with this Julia Child Rose, and can you share a little bit about that?
Well, okay, so basically my father and mother and Julia and her husband Paul were very good friends, and they when they moved, they used to spend sort of winters in Santa Barbara, and then their summers were in Massachusetts and Boston, Cambridge. But anyway, as Paul passed on, and Julia then moved out to Santa Barbara full time, and anyway, they became really close friends. I think my father, she somebody brought her to dinner at my dad's house, and they just became fast friends. They were aligned in so many different areas. They just hit it off. And so they started going to the farmers markets together, and then she started coming over to more often to dinner, and pretty soon she was sort of a fixture, um, during the holidays at our home, and Sunday night dinners and that sort of thing. And so dad had been working on her to, he just said, you need to have a rose. You need to have a rose named after you. And she was very resistant at first. She didn't subscribe to any type of commercial um, um,
Like
endeavor.
endorsements or whatever. Yeah.
No, no, no. It was PBS all the way. She never loaned her name to a pot and pan line or a knife line, or she didn't even want to do a scholarship in her name because it would only benefit one person. And so
Mm.
she's very picky. And he kept saying, well, the rose if you had a rose, it could really be universal, and it could be in everyone's garden, and they're not terribly expensive, and it would be a wonderful way to remember you. And he just kept it up and kept it up, and one day she arrived at the farm with her lawyer and her niece, and she said, I'm ready to pick my rose. And so I know, I was like, well, okay. And we had a little test garden. And so I went to the test garden, and I knew she would pick the yellow rose, but I thought, well, she better have a backup, because in the rose world, you never know what's already been spoken for, or if it's going to even make it into commerce. That's a whole different conversation. But she didn't want any other rose. She only wanted the yellow one. So I called Tom Caruth and I said, Tom, Julia wants the yellow rose. And he said, well, it's already named and we can't do that. And I said, well, then that's too bad. She's not going to have a rose. And so as I was hanging up the phone, the second line rang in my office, and Tom said, I'll make it work.
Mm.
And he gave her the rose. And
Mm.
the reason, it had already won the ARS award for the best rose of the year, and then go on to get more awards over the years. But and they've only given that rose to two other people, Queen Elizabeth and Mr. Lincoln. So most of the time they want these winners to be generically named, so that they're less relatable to a person.
Hmm.
But they felt like she was well liked enough, and such a universal name, that that they could do this, and so they did. So anyway, and she sadly did not see the rose in production ever. It was she passed away before they were in commerce, but
Mm.
we have the rose now to remember her by.
We do.
So
I have one in my garden, and I know you have probably hundreds or thousands because it's in your product line for Rose Story Farm, right?
yes, it is, and it's a wonderful rose. I always say, tell people, my clients, my garden clients, that if they want to start with one rose, that's the rose to start with,
Mm.
because it literally does grow anywhere, and it's bulletproof. It is
Mm.
truly bulletproof. Um,
Well, I know that I see on here you've listed the breeder and the year, and then what form it is, like a floribunda or a shrub, and then what it's known for fragrance wise, size, and the bloom. So those are sort of the features that you really wanted to highlight as you showcased these 300 roses, right?
yes, yes. And there was a lot of, there was a lot of discussion about what we should include. I felt very strongly that the fragrance should be noted. But in a book, maybe fragrance is not quite as important in a book, but I felt like people really need to know if a rose is fragrant or not. And as you know, in our garden, all the roses are fragrant. So that's a prerequisite for making it into Rose Story Farm production, that
For
it's
sure.
fragrant.
Yeah.
So that
And
was important to me.
yeah. And the thing is that you're also helping people think about choosing roses for floral design, but also for planting, because you are
Yes.
a nursery as well, right?
Yes. One of the things that we debated about was whether we should have the zone listed on this page. But my feeling is that almost every rose can be grown in places where roses grow, depending on the rootstock. So you might get a Julia Child on a different rootstock for the East Coast, and that would be just fine. So I didn't really think including the zone was that critical. And
Mhm.
I don't know, that may come back to bite me, but I'm not sure. I was curious what you think about that.
Well, it's sort of back to the thing we were chatting about before we started recording, and that is your belief that there's so much opportunity for local growers more than ever because, well, first of all, you've educated a whole population of would-be flower farmers who want to add roses to their, whatever their repertoire is. But the sustainability issue of buying your roses close to where you're going to use them, either in the landscape or in floral design, it seems like there would already be that inherent reflection of zone or, wherever it was bred or grown by a commercial or wholesale nursery.
That's kind of what my thought was. And almost all the rose catalogs have a zone listed. But I think it's a little bit disconcerting to sort of look at a rose and say, okay, well, it can grow from zone 4 to zone 10, when most roses can grow from zone 4 to zone 10. You just have to take care to winterize them in the winter, and some of them don't do quite as well in warmer climates, and some of them don't do as well in cooler climates. But the idea was that people would look at this book and pick a color that they like, and then be able to pick a rose within that color that they find at their local nursery. So they could maybe carry the book along with them and say, I really like this color. What would you recommend that I start with? Their local nursery. What would you recommend? And if they don't, not to get your heart set on one particular rose that might not be available that year or in your particular area. So that was my idea with the roses for the garden. And then for cut flowers, sort of the same thing. You could take the book, match what you wanted to do on your dinner table or in a, for a wedding bouquet or whatever. You could take it to your local flower market or even the grocery store and sort of say, what do you have in this color? And instead of going in and saying, I have to have Coco Loco.
Right.
Maybe there's something else. Maybe there's another rose that's the same color.
Well, let's go back to that. I just have to chuckle, Dani, because you have seen this is Coco Loco on the right here.
Yeah.
You've seen every rose fad come and go in the 30 plus years that you've had Rose Story Farm. Does everything just cycle through eventually, or you're no longer just supplying white roses for weddings? That's for sure, right?
This Coco Loco has had such a long life. I cannot believe it. I think it's been around almost, I would say 8 years now, maybe longer. I keep thinking that the neutrals are going to go away, but they don't. They don't. Every year someone says, oh, well, the new Pantone color is X, and so we're not going to see any more neutrals. And that just, I don't know. They just don't seem, they have a life of their own. They just seem to carry on and carry on.
Well, a rose like this, it just takes maybe 8 years for there to be enough, I don't know, enough rootstock or enough bare root plants to get out into the, into farms so that there can be enough to meet all this demand. Is that
right?
part of the
Yes.
issue?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
And now I think it's oversaturated at this point. I think, I mean, if you want Coco Loco, you can get Coco Loco. 5 years ago, you couldn't. Even during the pandemic, there were no Coco Locos available
Wow.
as plants. So,
Wow.
but it's an interesting rose. It changes color throughout the season. I mean, that particular
Even
rose
here.
on the lower left, that's more traditional. That's the more typical color of Coco Loco. But in warmer climates, that lavender hue that you see at the top there,
Mm-hmm.
this is actually not one stem of rose. This is 3 stems of rose, because I wanted to show that there are multiple colors on this plant. For instance, if Felicia of Menagerie, her cocos are completely different than mine because her temperature up there is completely different. So she might have the more mauve colored ones, where I have the more beigey covered
Mm.
ones, or vice versa. I
Mm-hmm.
might have, in the fall, ours are very mauve colored, and hers might be a little bit more beige because
Hmm.
she's got cooler weather. So it's interesting, and I think all roses are somewhat like that. The color depends on your climate and the soil, and um, obviously your zone.
Well, I mean, that's the delight. That's what gives us that sort of invitation to enjoy the full life cycle of a rose. And in this world of Pinterest boards and inspo boards that wedding couples give to their florists or maybe farmer florists, you want to educate people to not ask for exactly what's on that picture, right? You want to say there's
Exactly.
nuances.
Oh, absolutely. It's so frustrating when we can't, because almost all brides want an what do you call, a prototype before their wedding. So let's say their wedding is in August and they want the prototype in early April. There's no way that particular rose is going to be the same color in
Mm,
August. So
mm.
if they say, look, I really would like peach colored roses, well, that's one thing, and we might not use the same rose. Particularly for garden roses, this is the case. Now, if you're talking about a greenhouse rose or a greenhouse flower, it's a whole different ball game. I mean, they
Mhm.
can,
They're more
completely,
standardized.
oh yeah, they can control the climate inside. They can control the whatever they put on their roses.
Mhm.
Everything is totally, yeah,
Mhm.
confined. So, but for garden roses, there's no way. I mean, they'll say, well, this doesn't look like your prototype. And I said, well, yeah, but you want this particular rose. This is your rose. It
And
isn't the
Mother
right.
Mother Nature has a little hand in this, and
Right, right,
seasonality. Well,
right.
I'm just thinking about, Dani, your launch of this boutique rose farm, that kind of the little engine that really changed the luxury wedding business, in my opinion, for florals. And um, I don't. Well, first of all, let me back up and say I will share the link to your past podcast interviews so people can hear a little bit of the history of how that all came about. Frankly, I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but
I don't
um,
either.
but I do. I am so fascinated with how you have revolutionized what people want for their wedding roses. The garden rose is a different animal altogether, a different plant altogether. And why did you go in that route and start selling garden roses to florists? Is it just because that's what delighted you and that's what you
Well,
loved?
yes. The simple answer is yes. That is what it called to me, and that's what I liked. And of course, I could not have picked a more difficult flower to to grow for commercial. I mean, it has about a minute base life, and
Yeah,
so it's
right.
ridiculous. We've had to basically sort of invent how to ship it.
Yes, you
Yeah,
have.
it was
Yeah.
not been easy, but they're so beautiful. And now I think I want to get on a tiny bandwagon here. The term garden rose is used now for anything that looks like that rose on the left, a
Hmm.
full petaled rose, even though they can be grown in greenhouses. But a true garden rose is a garden rose. It's grown in the ground outside. And so I'm a little this is going to be my new bandwagon to sort of explain to people that a real garden rose cannot be grown in a greenhouse, because that's not my interpretation of a garden rose.
No,
So,
I'm glad you brought that up. And then, you talked about the modern roses. Are all modern roses garden roses, or is that a broader category?
well, all roses can be grown in the ground outdoors, and that, I think, in my opinion, is a garden rose.
Got it. Uh-huh.
So, but most greenhouse roses, there are a few exceptions. So I'm trying to think. Um, let's see. Trying to think of one rose that you could grow indoors and outdoors that's the same rootstock, and I can't think of one right now. But I know there are roses that
Mhm.
you can grow indoors or outdoors. But for the most part, these roses that we grow cannot be grown indoors.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a misnomer to say that a greenhouse rose is a garden rose. So we have to come up with a new name for roses that are grown in the ground outside.
That's so interesting. I remember seeing somebody who was a greenhouse grower in the US. I won't name names, but had a spray rose that happened to have multi petals, more than you'd normally see, and the grower was marketing it as a miniature garden rose, and I was like, "That's a category I didn't know existed," but it was more just to describe this gardenish form, like the one you see
Right,
on the left. So
right.
no wonder people are
The one
confused.
But that form, I mean, I have to credit David Austin for that form, really. Although some of the European, the Meonde and the Guillot roses had the same form, but he's kind of credited for bringing that to the United States, that fully petaled cup shape rose that everybody, you know, kind of gravitates to.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
rose on the right is a garden rose. That's a garden rose as well. And because
More of a
by
almost
definition,
more a little bit more of a single, not
right,
completely, but yeah.
right. And
Hmm.
Sally Holmes, which is a five-petaled rose, that's a garden rose. But how do we, Deborah? That's going to be up to you and me to pick a new name for roses that are grown outside in the garden.
Yeah, I would love to hear from other people about how they've encountered that, because I mean, you're just pointing to one thing that you are so good at, which is education and everything. And that's where the word story came from, right? Everything was trying to
Yes,
tell people a story so they would understand the magic of roses.
right. Or
Um,
exchange stories.
mhm.
Listen to other people's stories. I mean, you know as well as I do that some of our best information comes from other gardeners, other experiences. And so the idea of sharing stories is it's just, I mean, it's a wonderful way to garner knowledge. And that's going to be my next book. I'm telling you, it's going to be about rose stories. So,
Really?
so
That's
a
why
little
you're
hint.
that's why you're keeping the Rose Cottage, because you have more work to do
Yeah,
in there.
I do. I
Wow.
do.
Oh, Danny,
I
that's so
do.
great. Oh my
It's kind
goodness.
of fun, but anyway, so we have to come up with a different name for a garden rose, because now all the greenhouse growers have co-opted that name, um, and
Yeah,
I
and
don't think
it's
it's really accurate.
well, and not to pick on the greenhouse growers, but the wholesalers are in on it too. Like, it's just a marketing term now.
Right,
Um, yes, it might have a softer, maybe less stiff, rigid, tight, those hybrid teas that never open. It's not
right.
that.
You're right. They're trying to distinguish that rose shape, which is kind of the high pointed center, which is a hybrid tea most of the time. They're trying to, although having said that, there are hybrid teas that are shaped like, fully petaled cup shaped roses. So
Okay.
that's wrong as well.
Hmm.
But they're trying that high pointed center. I think that's the description that I would use of the grocery store rose. And they're
Yeah.
trying to distinguish the other form from that high pointed center. And they're doing that by calling the other a garden rose. But the
Wow.
garden roses that are quote unquote that the roses that they're calling garden roses that are grown in greenhouses typically have no fragrance at all. And
That's a great differentiation. I was going to ask you, is the American Rose Society what is it, AARS? Are they getting involved in this classification discussion, or is it really just kind of gotten crazy and people can't rein
I'm
it
not
in?
sure. I would love to talk to the current president and ask, and I think that's on my list, Debra. I'll figure out what we're doing to kind of differentiate
Uh,
our garden roses from other garden roses that
yeah.
are not garden roses, in my opinion.
Well,
So,
and I keep clicking through here, but this is crazy, but this is a big book. I'm only on spread number 86 and there's 169. So just for the viewers, we're not going to get through all of these. You have to buy your own copy, because it just goes on, and it's really the kind of book that you would just sit and, I guess, daydream and take notes and make yourself
yeah,
lists, and especially the way you have it organized, by color. And I know you've designed gardens by color. Remember that garden that I helped you with on the story with, where
yes.
it was like a medallion with sections. How did you design that? It was very color driven.
It was that was done like a rainbow, and we did it.
Hmm.
It was a full circle. The spokes of the circle were lines of roses in a rainbow fashion, and
Mm.
so yeah, that was one of the first gardens I ever designed, and it it was quite beautiful when it was in full bloom. So
And
yeah, that was fun.
the client came to you, as I recall, because she wanted to cut from her garden for her floral
Yes,
arranging.
yes,
That
yes.
was her
So
lifestyle.
yes, and that was my first attempt at planting roses really close together in one direction and giving them more room in another direction so that you could have sort of more bang for your buck, in a sense, if you wanted a cutting garden, to do
Interesting.
it that way, to kind of plant them hedge fashion instead of separating each plant by a couple of feet.
Oh, wow. So the spokes or spikes or whatever, they were tightly
Yes,
spaced, but
very
then
tight.
between
Between
each of
them
those.
was a little bit more room so that she could get in there and cut them, get in there and care for them, and that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
that was the first time I'd ever done that, and I realized that roses could be planted a lot more closely, planted together,
Mhm. Mhm.
than typically. Then history told us that we couldn't do that.
Mm.
That every rose needed 3 or 4 feet around it to really spread its wings. And roses will grow in almost any conditions and circumstances. I mean, they may not be prolific. You may only get a few blooms, but they literally will bloom just about anywhere they're planted. They
They
just
wanna
want
bloom.
to bloom. Yeah,
Yeah.
they do.
Wow.
So that was kind of fun.
A lot of it is trial and error, and
Yes.
you're relatively self-taught. I don't know, wanna mischaracterize that you haven't taken classes and all, but you've
But
kind
you
of
can. You can.
you've really been like trial and error on everything, and to get, maybe season after season to try to,
Yeah.
take on a challenge like something relating to productivity, or, how I don't know how you treat it if there's insects or disease. So,
Yes. Well, no, it's true. And I mean, I literally have no horticultural background whatsoever. I mean, absolutely none. I have a little bit of a design background, but that's it. And so, I mean, again, I feel like it is complete trial and error. And so when I have a new garden client now, I said, I will suggest to them, look, we can try it this way. This might be really fun for you. And if it doesn't work, we can move them and we can try
mm,
something different. So
mhm.
gardening it's a process, it's an experiment. It's never it's never static, it's always changing. And we can make mistakes in the garden, but I call those experiments.
Yeah, good.
And I think as long as you're not making the same mistake twice, then I
Mhm.
think you're doing pretty well. But I think that it's really important to give people the freedom to try things. We don't know how certain flower is going to do in a certain zone or a certain, and even if you say, like, okay, zone 4, but you're not taking into account the wind patterns, you're not taking into account maybe the native soil or the insect population or anything else.
Yeah.
So the zone
Yeah.
is not always the best way to sort of determine if something's going to do okay or not. The only way to do that is to play with it.
Yeah.
So the frustrating part of designing gardens that I have to contend with is those some clients want everything to be perfect tomorrow,
Yeah.
and that's just not gardening.
And like a
And
fully developed garden with no
right,
gaps
with
between
no
plants.
kind of with no kind of fiddling around or figuring out uh, what's going to work the best. So we have a plan. We have a lovely plan. We pick our colors, we pick our plants, we start, but a year or 2 years later, I'm encouraging people to take out the ones that maybe don't do as well as they'd like them to do, or move them, just try them in a different spot.
Hmm.
Um, that
Yeah.
sometimes works with a plant that's not doing well. And then, shovel pruning. I don't think people are so reluctant to get rid of something that doesn't perform well. They're really reluctant.
Right. But
But
real estate is precious, especially if you have a tiny garden. I love that term.
I know it's, yeah, I did not invent that, but
No,
I
I
love
like
it.
it.
I do. I really do. So,
Well,
so that's kind of a little, I don't know.
it's
Yeah.
encouraging. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the idea that you can relocate a rose is something that many people are afraid to do. And
Yeah.
isn't it really just, I mean, you probably can move it any time of the year, but there are better times than others for slightly bit more success.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got high 90s or high 80s weather in the summer, I wouldn't move a rose. But
Mhm.
the best time to move it is in the fall or in the spring,
Yeah.
when you're either right after you prune it or right before the spring season.
Mm.
But
Mhm.
in California, we are so lucky here. You could really probably move a rose at any time of the year.
Yeah.
And I have one client that sold her house, and she had her grandmother's roses in it, and she asked me to come and dig them up and pot them for her so that she could have them in her next house. And I'm still watching the roses. They're in pots here, but that was like 4 years ago. She
I mean,
she
like you're
hasn't.
babysitting them now?
I'm babysitting her roses, but we took those out in the middle of summer, as I recall, and
Wow.
they're just
Wow.
fine. They're doing great. So
Oh, that's great. Well,
yeah.
how are you dividing I mean, obviously this book was a huge project in I'm assuming the last year and a half or so, maybe 2 years. Um, but in general, you've survived COVID and Rose
Yeah.
Story Farm is, like stronger than ever. But I think some things have changed. Like I want to just maybe touch on that for people who have maybe visited in the past. You're not open to the public anymore. Isn't that
We're
correct?
not, once we had the fire and the mud flow, and we had so much damage after the mud flow that it was very frustrating for us, and it took us almost 4 years to get back to uh, where we were before the fire.
Mm.
So we stopped our tours at that point. We just couldn't. I was too embarrassed to have people come out and see the mess, and it really
Mhm.
was a mess. So we really focused on wholesale cut garden rose sales, which is a whole arm of the business. And then I personally focused on helping others with their gardens, and that part of the business has expanded to the point where that's just about all I do now, is outside gardens. But
Wow.
now it's our 25th anniversary this year of of not the 25th anniversary of the farm, but the 25th anniversary of selling our first roses. And so
Oh, oh, how
we're going to,
wonderful.
I know, we're going to have we picked about, I think we've picked 2 or 3 days a month between now and the fall where we're going to open for tours. And that'll be the first and only time that we are open to the public uh, for this year. So what we've
Okay.
got, I think the dates are on our website, but I think
Okay, we'll
there's
get those.
3 dates. Yeah, 3 dates in early June, late May, early June, and then a few more dates. But the idea is that we'll have people out, we'll show them what's happened to the farm, and we get requests all the time for people to come and visit, and we just have had we've had to say no. So this year it's kind of a special year. I don't think we'll do it again because it's just, we're not set up to do it.
Yeah.
I planted the whole parking area with roses.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
parking's going to be an issue. We'll have to figure out how to get people to the farm for the tour. But we're going to try it, and I'm really excited about, sharing the farm again and hearing people's rose stories and showing people what we're doing now and that sort of thing. So,
and so those dates they're available on your website. So we'll share that. And
yes,
when people come, will they be able to perhaps get a signed copy of the
yes,
book?
signed
Okay.
copy of the book, or take home a rose, or maybe take home a bouquet of flowers, or
Oh my
just
goodness.
kind of see what see what we're up to.
Oh,
And we'll see how it goes. Hopefully nobody's going to mind walking a little bit, because I think the parking is going to be
sure.
interesting.
Yeah.
but
It is a working farm. You're not
it
going
is
to
a
have red carpet
yeah.
access. So
No, and
be
we're going to,
prepared.
yeah, we'll limit the number of guests that we have for each tour, so that
Sure.
it's not overwhelming for anybody, and
Mm,
not for us as well. So
yeah.
anyway, so
Yeah.
that's going to be kind of fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you are working, you have committed to doing a second book.
I haven't committed
Oh,
yet,
but it's
but
in your
it's
mind.
in my brain.
All right. Hey, this was your dive in and go all
Oh,
in,
I
and
don't know.
now
I think it's a glutton for punishment. And you can relate too. I mean, I know you've written multiple books, but just the whole process of doing it and how long it takes, and just the agonizing over certain paragraphs. And I mean, and I only had like 14 pages to write. I didn't even have that much. I think it was harder to write those 14 pages than it would have been to write 100.
I
I
agree.
really do, because I just agonized over every word choice, and I wanted it to be my voice, and it was so hard to do it. I mean, you must live this daily.
I love print media. I love magazines and newspapers, and then that led to books, and there's a permanence to books. There's it's like an artifact that
Mhm.
lives, lives far beyond your blood, sweat, and tears to get it published. I will say that a friend of mine told me once that in the Jewish faith, and I'm not Jewish, but I'm quoting a Jewish friend, that there are three things that you aspire to. One is to have a child, one is to travel to Israel, and one is to write a book. And so
Wow.
I know. So I was like, well, I've done two of those three things. Maybe I'll get to
Yeah.
Israel one of these days.
Oh, no, I think I'll go with you.
But
And you
you putting a book on the level of going to your homeland and then having a child, it's sacred in a way. So,
Right. It
um,
is. And I just, I honestly, it was a struggle. And, I was fortunate in that, 10 Speed and my agents had confidence that I could do this book, and they approached me rather than vice versa. And I know that, I mean, I think I've never taken that for granted. I've never
yeah.
taken for granted the fact that I did not have to put together a proposal. I just had to make this perfect. I think
Well, you've
that
talked
was,
about it for so long. It's wonderful that they kind of made it impossible to say no.
well, they
You
did.
were
And
there.
I know it was so fun, but just not having to do that first part was, I think had I had to do the proposal, I might have known how much work the book would be.
Yeah.
That's the difference. So I was kind of caught unaware of how much, just blood, sweat, and tears, as it were, it takes to do this. I mean,
Yeah.
and picking the photographs. I mean, we agonized over which view we liked of each. I mean, like the photo that that you just
Uh-huh.
passed. That was, it's called, the
This
little
one
one on
here.
the right. Yeah,
Perf
I love
perf
that Perfume
Perfume
Dream.
Breeze.
Perfume
Perfume
Breeze.
Breeze? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not familiar with that.
Oh, it's such a sweet rose. It's just an incredible rose, and it's a climber, and it takes over the world. And when you walk under that, walk near that rose or under an arch with it, I mean, all you do is smell that rose, and it's
Mm,
so sweet.
mm.
But we agonized over we did 5 different views of that particular stem, and we agonized over which one we thought really exemplified the rose the best. And so, 300 of roses where we were looking at every single view of,
Right.
you don't just take one photo of the bloom. You
No.
turn it a little bit, you fix it. And so Vicky and I would, afterwards, we would say, well, what do you think? Which do you like best? So, I mean, I felt like it was kind of birthing something.
Yeah. And a true
um,
collaboration. And that
yeah,
particular perfume breeze, I just have to compliment you on choosing that one because you really see the form and you see how clusters, the floral clusters come together and how beautiful the foliage is and how
yes.
those dainty little buds dance at the end of the tips. I
Yeah.
want to grow it now. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
you should. That is, I mean, if I had to recommend one rose for somebody to grow over an arbor, I'd say grow that one. It's just, and
Mm,
that's Otto and Sons. They have that
mm.
rose,
Mm.
and they turned me on. Cindy, who's Scott's wife, Cindy Clittish, she's the one that sort of said, "You've got to, just look at this rose." And so I just fell immediately in love with it. Bought 8 of them, I think, have them planted all over the farm now, and it's great. So
Wow,
I
that's
think you'll
beautiful.
love it. Yeah, really, really
Oh,
fun.
well, Dani, we could talk for another 3 or 4 hours.
I
Unfortunately, we're
know.
not together and we don't have a glass of wine with us. But other than that, tell me anything else that you want to include that and let people know about who've happened upon this conversation. Anything that I've left out.
I think, I don't know. I just like talking to you, Deborah. I've missed you.
I know. I saw you in 2019,
Uh,
the year you and Felicia had that beautiful
oh,
workshop
the workshop.
in
Yes. And
March.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
And
she's,
then,
oh my gosh, I love her farm and I love her tulips and what she's doing with her bare root roses. And she's just, oh my gosh.
yeah, you guys put on
She's
a big party, you invited me, I loved it, and, like, less than a year later, COVID hit,
right.
and we couldn't see each other, but I don't know if I'll get down for one of your open houses, but I'm really happy to share that with our audience because if you are able to coordinate a visit to Rose Story Farm, you will not be disappointed. It is
Yeah.
just such a special place, and the people there are very special. The whole Dall'Armi and Han families, they just made me feel welcome every time I come.
Oh, well,
So
and I'm very much looking forward to your next visit for sure. Felicia and I had a second workshop planned, and then COVID hit. So we had to
that's
cancel
right.
it, which is too
Yeah,
bad. So, and now everybody's just kind of done their own thing. That's the one thing that COVID did for people. I think it just really had an impact on farmer florists. We had to
mhm.
really sort of figure out what we wanted to do, what worked for us, and a lot of the rose growers have gone in sort of slightly different directions, which has been really wonderful to see. And it's such a collaborative group of people. It really I love that about farming. I love the collaboration. I
Yeah,
love other flower farmers and sharing ideas and stuff. But that's the one thing. And I think we've just gotten so busy that it would be hard to break away and start to do this again. But I think there's probably another collaborative workshop in our
yeah.
future. So
Yeah, yeah, sign me up. Well,
okay,
listen, this has been so much fun. I will, as I said, share all of the things that we've discussed, including links and photos and um, social media places and the calendar of events for Rose Story Farm so people can plan their spring and summer and maybe fall. And congratulations on the 25-year anniversary. I didn't know that, but that's brilliant.
thank you.
You,
I know
yeah,
it feels like it was yesterday. And I think that's what happens when you do something you truly love. It does,
yeah,
time does go by quickly. I mean, the
yeah,
kids are both out of the house. I mean, they're gone, they're launched,
yeah.
and they grew up here. And so that's the one thing that's sort of fun about this whole thing is like I look at our family and how the family has changed. I mean, I think Will was 3 and Jeffrey was literally 6 months old when we moved out here, and now, whatever,
They're
they're
men.
they're men, and they're
Yeah.
married, and they're living their lives and doing what they love, and so that's
Mm,
been really fun. So,
I love it.
yeah, it's been a transition. I think this year has been or the last couple of years have been
Yeah.
really a transition for all of us. So
yeah. You're ready to be out and about talking with people, sharing this beautiful book, and congratulations. I'm really proud of you.
Thank
You've
you
done
so
a
much,
beautiful job.
Debra. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon, Dani.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us today. What a lovely experience to talk roses with one of our living rose legends. Thank you, Dani. I can't wait to return to Rose Story Farm for another visit. You can find the replay video of today's interview at slowflowerspodcast.com for episode 605, as well as some interior images of the Color of Roses book and a link to order your own copy. I'll also share the public dates for visiting Rose Story Farm, which they've just released. The first date is at the end of April, so check it out if you are going to be in the Santa Barbara, Carpinteria area. I want to thank our supporters who bring this show to you. This show is brought to you by slowflowers.com, the free online directory to more than 850 florists, shops, and studios who design with local, seasonal, and sustainable flowers, and to the farms that grow those blooms. It's the conscious choice for buying and sending flowers. Thank you to our lead sponsor, Farm Girl Flowers. Farm Girl Flowers delivers iconic burlap wrap bouquets and lush, abundant arrangements to customers across the U.S., supporting U.S. flower farms by purchasing more than $10 million of U.S.-grown, fresh and seasonal flowers and foliage annually. Discover more at farmgirlflowers.com. Thank you to Longfield Gardens, which provides home gardeners with high-quality flower bulbs and perennials. Their online store offers plants for every region and every season, from tulips and daffodils to dahlias, caladiums, and amaryllis. Check out the full catalog at longfield-gardens.com. Thank you to Rooted Farmers. Rooted Farmers works exclusively with local growers to put the highest quality, specialty cut flowers in floral customers' hands. When you partner with Rooted Farmers, you are investing in your community, and you can expect a commitment to excellence in return. Learn more at rootedfarmers.com. Thank you to Johnny's Selected Seeds, an employee-owned company that provides our industry with the best flower, herb, and vegetable seeds, supplied to farms large and small, and even to backyard cutting gardens like mine. Find the full catalog of flower seeds and bulbs at johnnysseeds.com. The Slow Flower Show is a member-supported endeavor, and I value our loyal members and supporters. If you're new to our weekly show or our long-running podcast, check out all of our resources at slowflowersociety.com. I'm Debra Prinzing, host and producer of The Slow Flowers Show and the Slow Flowers Podcast. Next week, you're invited to join me in putting more slow flowers on the table, one stem, one vase at a time. The content and opinions expressed here are either mine alone or those of my guests alone, independent of any podcast sponsor or other person, company, or organization. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I'll see you next